a way to do it. We expected that. We expected that, and we appreciated people's responses. What we didn't expect, not in a million years, was for people to actually start sending in questions about Mexicans. For people to actually call my bluff and start sending in questions. So the column those Who Weekly publishes every Thursday morning. By noon, I already had about 50 questions from people. People just started sending in questions like crazy. I went back to Will, I'm like, what the hell do I do with all these questions? We're only supposed to do the column one time. Here's all these questions. So he said, we hit a nerve with this column, so let's continue to do this column until there's no more questions to be answered. Here I am, 5.5 years later, the questions keep coming. They have not stopped. So what happened then, that was November 2004. Cinco de Mayo 2005, we expanded the column to answer 2 questions per week. Before it was just 1 question per week, then we did 2 questions per week. That's still the format that we use today. Sometimes it's 3 questions, sometimes it might be 1 question, but for the most part, it's 2 questions. That's Cinco de Mayo 2005. Spring of 2006, we started syndicating the column, so now it comes out in 39 newspapers across the country with a weekly circulation of over 2 million. It comes out in papers where you might, or places where you might expect it, like obviously Los Angeles, San Diego, Houston, El Paso. It comes out in places where you might not expect it, but you're like, okay, fine. So it comes out there in New York, in Salt Lake City, in Denver, and then it comes out in places where, as being a native of Southern California, somebody who's spent his entire life here, when I hear that these cities want to carry my column, I'm like, why? I'm talking about Chattanooga, Tennessee, Macon, Georgia, something called Steamboat Springs, Colorado, which I still don't know what it is, but it carries my column. And I mean, that's the, I don't want to call myself a bigot, but that's the narrow-minded Southern Californian that I am, who thinks all Mexicans still come to the American Southwest and stay there. No, Mexicans are now all over the United States, and so all the growing pains that comes with migration are starting to spread all across the United States, so therefore the column has become so widely syndicated. So that was 2006. 2007 it came out as a hardcover of this. It was an LA Times bestseller. Really cool. Then in 2000, I was able to do that. In 2008, it came out as a paperback edition of this book. This was also a bestseller, and the column still. That was 2008. Here we are 2 years later. The column still continues. Questions still keep coming, and it's been great. So a little bit about the column itself, some of the methodology. Then I'm going to read some of my favorite questions, just to give you folks a sense of the column. Then get to any questions you folks may have. So. The reason I do the column again is just to debunk stereotypes and misconceptions that people have about Mexicans. But it's not a straightforward column. It's not just great advice. It is very specifically done in the vein of satire. So if we know anything about satire, it's a form of comedy, but it's not all about giggles. It's where people take a very specific, outrageous persona and say crazy, insane things, or act the fool, but so they can make a bigger political point about something. We think of the great satirists of both the past and the present. The past, Jonathan Swift, Mark Twain, in the present day, Jon Stewart, Stephen Colbert, Dave Chappelle. These are people that we laugh at what they do, but we don't consider them comedians because we know they're trying to do something more serious. When Jonathan Swift was advocating the modest proposal to feed Irish babies to the English, in a way he was being ridiculous, but in a way he was being deadly serious. He was making a very specific point about the way the British Crown was treating the Irish at the time. And same thing with Stephen Colbert when he plays this buffoon of a conservative commentator on his show. He's also making he's ridiculing Fox News and basically what passes off as news nowadays. So similarly with my column, then I don't mind playing the fool. I don't mind playing like this super extreme macho version of what a Mexican man is supposed to be, but because that allows me the space to be able to, while people are laughing or people are being outraged, I'm able to sneak in the truth. I view that approach as being a Trojan horse. In other words, if people see the column, if they think it's a joke column, they'll pick it up because they want to laugh. And then while they're reading, it's my job to make them continue to read. And while I'm doing that, hopefully I'm putting the facts out there. I'm confronting racism. I'm answering whatever questions people may have about Mexicans, no matter what may be. And it's an approach that I found to be successful in combating hatred and racism in answering people's questions, because I still do regular serious op-ed pieces for the LA Times. I still do regular serious journalism for the OC Weekly, and I'll always continue to do that because there's a value to that. But in terms of fighting racists, that is the way to do it. Of course, intelligent minds can disagree about my approach to the column, about the column itself. Sometimes people say that, well, the column perpetuates stereotypes, especially with that, the Mexican logo and all that. It perpetuates stereotypes, and it allows people to be racist because, hey, you're a Mexican guy who's saying these things, so therefore people think they can be racist. Well, the next racist, whoever uses my column to justify their racism, it'll be the first racist. In fact, the people who hate this column more than anything are bona fide racists. I mean, we're talking about neo-Nazis and folks like that who see right through the satire of the column, and they see exactly what the column is about, which is, again, to ridicule them and to answer questions and make the very shocking assertion that Mexicans are people just like anyone else. That Mexicans are, honestly, or what do I always say? Mexicans are just like anyone else, if not more so. In other words, there's good, there's bad, there's diversity, there's this, and that. But it's something, I know it's a cliche to say that, but it's something that really gets lost, especially in media depictions of Mexicans, which always have Mexicans in a very specific box, in a very specific genre. So what I try to do is answer any of those questions that people may have about Mexicans. But again, answering with the facts, answering with the truth, and trying to put in a little bit of humor and satire in there. There are some, and a couple of things more about the column before I get into answering questions. People always insist that there's no way on earth anybody can actually ask you some of the questions. Because you read some of the questions, your eyes will just widen, and you're like, no way anybody could have ever done that. But no, except for that Gringo Gabacho question that I read in the first part, every single question I've ever answered in my column, somebody has sent it. I reserve the right to do three things though. If it's too long, I cut it for space constraint because people don't like to read rambling letters all the time, although sometimes it can be really funny, especially when it's misspelled. I do edit them. I also edit them for grammatical purposes because people don't know how to use semicolons anymore. So I want to clean it up from time to time. And I also tell people, make up a funny nickname for yourself, because if not, I'll make one up for you, and you don't want that to happen. Again, this is supposed to be a take on the advice column, and what I always loved about advice columns like Dear Abby, Ask Amy, Savage Love, is all those funny nicknames that they have at the bottom, like, Sleepless in Seattle, Pensive in Peoria, Outrage at Occidental. I love those, and so I tell people, make something up for yourself, and most of the times they comply, sometimes they don't, and so then I get to poke fun at them. So I don't make up a single question. And then people also think, well, the only people who could possibly enjoy Ask a Mexican are racist white people. Well, you look at the room around you. Wherever I go, the audience is always multicultural. Mix of everyone. If I had to take a census as to the people who send me questions about the column, which I should do one day, but just on my own rough observations, I'd say probably 40% of the audience would be Latino. Out of those Latinos, most of them are people of Mexican descent. And by Mexican descent, it could be everything from fifth-generation Chicano who doesn't speak any Spanish, to the children of Mexican immigrants like myself, to Mexican immigrants who read the column in English but write to me in Spanish, to Mexicans in Mexico writing to me in English. So it's a whole mix of people. Then the other 40% would be white folks, for lack of a better term. Then 10 to 15% African American, 10 to 15% Asian American. It mixes. And I also get a lot of questions from Canadians for some bizarre reason. I don't understand why. And what's the biggest mystery about the Canadians is that they almost always send the same version of this question, which goes like this. Us Canadians, we're really nice people. You Mexicans, you're really nice people. But those Americans, they're a bunch of assholes. So why don't we get our countries together and take over the United States? I don't understand it. I really don't understand it. So I told that to a friend. I told that to a friend of mine who works for the Canadian Broadcasting, I think it's Company or Corporation, which is their version of the BBC or PBS. And she laughed, and you can imagine a Canadian accent because I don't do voices. She said, "Gosh darn us Canadians! Even when we're trying to be racist, we're the nicest people on earth." But anybody, so the people who read the column, it's anybody who has any interest in Mexicans nowadays. And nowadays, increasingly, that's all all types of people all across the United States and increasingly even the world.